So, hi and welcome to this session entitled Deliver Adaptive and Personalized Experiences with SharePoint 2013. My name is Christer Michaelsen. I'm a group program manager at Microsoft. I'm joined here on stage by Dag Edison, the lead program manager in my group. Now, Dag and myself, we have worked with search and recommendations for several years. First in the company Fast Search and Transfer, and then through 2 SharePoint releases at Microsoft. We also had the good fortune to work closely with influential companies who deliver engaging and sticky experiences online. We are very, very happy to be here today to talk about some of the new features and capabilities in SharePoint 2013 in this area. By the end of this session, I hope that you will understand it's not just features that you can use to deliver adaptive and personalized experiences. It's in fact powerful building blocks that you can go and build your own creative, personalized experiences on top of. Now, personalized experiences, that sort of assumes that you know something about your users. So let's try to personalize this session. And the way we're going to do that is that we're going to let you, the audience, we're going to let you know a little bit more about us, your presenters. And the first thing you need to know about myself and Dag is that we come from a galaxy far, far away. And to prove my point, what you're looking at right now, it's a map from Bing Maps, a screenshot from Bing Maps. And Dag and myself, we're from a country called Norway, that you might have heard of. But we're from a small town called Tromsø, above the Arctic Circle. And here's a couple of Wikipedia facts about Tromsø. It's 70,000 people there. The average high temperature in November is just about freezing. It's true. And if you want to compare where we're at the same latitude, you will find Barrow, Alaska, here in the States. Again, some Wikipedia facts. Wikipedia tells me that Barrow is actually the northernmost city in the US, and the average high temperature in November is far below freezing. Now, the big difference in temperature between the two, I think, is because of the Gulf Stream. So we're pretty happy about the Gulf Stream in Tromsø. Today, we're in Las Vegas, and the population of about 2 million. And the average high temperature is 14 degrees Celsius. So as you can understand, Dag and myself, we're very happy to be here. 14 degrees Celsius, that's hot. That's a good summer day. So this is our second summer vacation in November. That's pretty hot. And also the days are getting pretty short and dark back home, 24/7 dark. So just to see the sun at this point is good for us. Now, so we have these different locations. We talk about personalized experiences. We're going to introduce 2 personas. One is Dag Edison, who's an actual persona. That's Dag over here. Here you see a picture of Dag doing a ski jump in front of beautiful Tromsø. It's said about Norwegians that all Norwegians are born with skis on their feet. I don't know if that's true, but I think it's true for Dag. The other person is Donna. She's a made-up character, and she's from Las Vegas. So we're going to use these 2 personas when we start to build personalized experiences. Now, the first thing we're going to do, we're actually on stage here. We're going to start with the Contoso electronic store frontend that some of you maybe have seen already. We're going to start with that, and we're going to build it and make it more adaptive and personalized as we go. So I'll turn it over to Dag now, so maybe you can give us a small recap of what the starting point is, so we can then evolve from there.
Yeah, so the site that we're going to be using throughout this session is an e-commerce electronic superstore front end. It's completely built on search. All the items in this front end are fetched through search. And it's also implemented using only 3 ASPX pages. So what does it mean that it's driven by search? Let's take a quick look at the items that are for sale in our shop. They reside in a different site collection called the product catalog. And here you can see the list. of the items and their metadata. So this is nothing you can show to customers. So what happens is that this list gets crawled by SharePoint, and all the items and their metadata are put into the search index. And it also is on top of the search index that we build our site. So if you take a look at the front page, and at the bottom here, we have some items that are surfaced through a content search web part. And we can browse around using these navigators on top. And there's different categories and different subcategories. And all these pages are driven by one single SPX page. And the items are surfaced through a search query driven by this content search web part. Similarly, if I go into the item detail, the information about the item is also fetched through a search query. So there's a search query that gets just one single item and renders it here with all its metadata. So we have already a great site based on 3 pages and where everything is gotten through search, but we're going to make it better.
So we talk about adaptive experiences, and by adaptive experiences, it assumes that something is changing. So what's changing? We'll have a look at that. One thing is that your product catalog, your inventory might change. So think about Contoso. If they decided to add electronic toys or something in their catalog, in the search-driven approach, if they do that, they will add the products in the list, and it will just automatically appear in this storefront. It will find its place in the right category, and the items will just surface automatically. So the search-driven approach sort of accommodates that kind of change already. And next type of change that you'll see are more of the seasonal trends. So here we see a picture of skis, and typically skis are popular in the winter, and beachwear is popular in the summer. Now in Tromsø, you could argue that skiing is actually an all-year activity, and beachwear is something we don't buy unless we're going somewhere. So these seasonal trends is something you can anticipate and then curate, but there are more subtle changes that happen. So a popular movie is out, and an actor is using some fancy sunglasses. The next day, they are popular. So we want to be able to understand what's trending and popular and have the site adapt automatically. The third thing that changes is the fact that people are different. And Doug from the Arctic and Donna from Las Vegas, they definitely have different perspective and style, and they want different things. So we'll look at how to target content differently to do these 2 different personas. The way that we're going to structure this talk is really to try to do 3 deep dives on the stage. And the first one will be around how to capture user behavior. We'll use Facebook as our sort of profile store, and we'll add Facebook like button and see if we can track users that click on that. We'll talk about how to enable and do actually enable recommendations on the site. So what's recommendations, and how can we even step up and make recommendations personal? And finally, how can we target user segments? So how can we, as business owners, make sure that Donna and Doug are seeing 2 different things? So show of hands, how many developers do we have in the audience right now? Good, good. And if you're anything like most developers that Doug and myself have met, you want to see the code, you want to step inside the box, you want to really have a feel for what's going on. And that's what we're going to do. So we're 2 PMs out of our comfort zone, just like this. This guy over here is trying to stand on his feet for the first time. We're going to show you the code and actually try to build this thing on stage. So the first deep dive is how to capture user behavior. And we're going to add a Facebook like button on our item details page. And we're going to see how we can use that to track overall traffic. But first, Doug, SharePoint is doing usage tracking out of the box. So what does it do, and how can we use that to even now make the site more adaptive?
Yeah, so SharePoint has some adaptive features right out of the box, as Christos says. And we can just use that straight away. Every time a user clicks or views a page or an item in SharePoint, that will be registered by SharePoint. And these events will be counted and put in the search index, which allows us to sort our search queries on that. So if I quickly go in and edit this page and modify the search query that's being issued from this content search web part, I'll modify the query. Then there's a sorting tab here, which is currently set to sort on rank. And there's a whole lot of managed properties from the index that you can select to sort on. What I'm going to sort on right now is the views recent. This managed property contains the counts of view events that the items have received over the last 14 days. So this list will change when I select to sort the category page query on that. So here's the new page. I'll save it. And now we have different items. So these are now the items that were the most popular over the last 14 days. And this will, of course, change from day to day as people click around and use the site. So already, using built-in functionality, we have an adaptive site.
Good. So we'll explain that a little more thorough. So what's really happening here is that every time somebody is accessing a SharePoint page, we are actually instrumenting and tracking their behavior. So in this case, Christer is viewing the top page of our demo. Dag is doing the same. That's being tracked into the event store. Daily, all of the events for that day are fed into a new component in SharePoint, which is called the Analytics Processing Engine. Now, this engine is really a large-scale distributed processing engine based on the industry standard MapReduce. So in fact, we've added big data processing capabilities natively into SharePoint. Now, this engine, it looks at all the event streams, and it tries to mine for certain relationships. So some of the things that this engine does is it creates usage counts, simply understanding how popular an item or a document in SharePoint is. It creates recommendations. We'll talk more about that later. But basically, it's trying to understand, based on all the usage on my site, what are they looking at and what are the related products. We look at popularity trends. Are documents becoming more popular or less popular? These are just some examples of what this engine looks at. The output of that engine then flows into two different subsystems. One is the analytics reporting, which is used to surface traditional Excel reports on historic trends and performance of my data. The other part goes into the search index. Now, in the search index, that's where all my products come from, right? So the whole search-driven experience starts by searching the index. And now the output of the analytics processing is actually enriched into that index. So we're combining analytic information with product meta information in the search index. So essentially, what then happens is that we observe people, we do some processing to understand what they're looking for. That feeds into the search index, which then again feeds an effect into the overall experience. So what you see here is really a virtuous cycle. People do something, we observe, we optimize, and we change the behavior accordingly. Now, we said we're going to add the Facebook like button. So what we're actually going to track now is not that Christer viewed something, but the fact that Christer liked something. But the like event is not something SharePoint knows about. So we actually had to create a new event type. And what we're going to build is to add the Facebook like button, if you can see it on that page, into our item details page. It's not there now. So Doug, how can we go about adding new events and finally getting that into our overall experience?
Yes, to understand that, we have to take a little look at PowerShell, actually. So that's where we manipulate our event types. So I'll show you a couple of commands that are useful when looking at event types. So this command will list up all the currently known event types in SharePoint. So I get the analytics configuration for the tenant and print out the event type definitions, which gives us this list. And at the top there, you can see views, which is the event type that I just sorted on in my previous example. Then there's a bunch of other built-in event types. And at the bottom, you'll see one that is not out of the box from SharePoint. It's a Facebook like event that I have added previously just for this demo. So what does an event type look like? What properties does it have? So these are the properties of an event type. I won't go into them all. It has IDs. It has a name that I gave it when I created it. And then there are two very important ones. That's the lifetime managed property property and the recent managed property name. These contain the name of the managed property in the search index that will contain the counts of this event type. So the usage event one recent managed property in the search index is what I need to sort on if I want to do something similar as I did with the view recent earlier on. There are other properties like recommendation weight and relevance weight, which tell SharePoint how important this event should be in the recommendations and relevance calculations being done in the MapReduce engine that Crystal mentioned. So I've already created the Facebook-like event, but I would like to show you how to actually create an event type. So I'm going to create another event that might be useful on our site called a purchase event. So an event type needs a GUID, it needs a name, and then simply call the register event type function as shown, and there you go, we have created a new event type. And then we can go and modify the parameters of the event type. Like this, I want this purchase event to be important in the recommendations algorithm because that a person buys a product is a powerful endorsement, and we need to use that information. Let's just take a look at that. And there's our new event type.
So good, we now seen that we can add our own event types, but Doug, we haven't really tracked anything. So we need to add the Facebook like button on our page and make sure that we intercept and track those events when users are clicking on that.
Yes, so as you just mentioned, what we want to do is to go to the item details page and add the Facebook like button here. So this item details are rendered by an item display template that I'll go show you now, and we'll go and modify it to do what we want. So here it is. The first thing I need to do is to just simply draw the button itself. So this is standard Facebook HTML markup for how to put a Facebook like button in your code. I'm not going to go deeply into that. I'll only say that we're liking a random image on the internet since this isn't actually a store. But where do we actually send our events? So there's some JavaScript code up here that does that. We have initializing this page, we run some standard Facebook functions that will subscribe to the click event of the Facebook button. So whenever the Facebook button is clicked, we call this log Facebook like to event store function, which is right up here. What this function does is it gets the ID of the item from the page. It gets the ID of the site of the item from the page, and it gets the user ID of the user we're currently looking at. The user ID can be either gotten from SharePoint if the user is logged in. If it is not a logged in scenario, if the user is anonymous, then users can be tracked using a cookie or a session cookie or a similar technique. When we have this information, we call the log analytics event function, of which there are two. This is the one for an anonymous scenario where we need to specify all this. There's a simpler one for the logged in scenario where most of this information can be gotten from the context. So, okay, I've modified that file. Let me save it. And I just need to make sure that it correctly creates the corresponding JavaScript. There we go. If I go back here.
The suspense.
F5. The suspense. And again. and there it is.
Whoa.
So, now, so when I now press this like button, the product is liked on Facebook, but also an event is sent to SharePoint that we will count and that we will be able to manipulate later on, and well, just to show that it actually works.
He's actually using his own Facebook account for this.
Don't.
That's rich of you.
There you go.
Okay, so now we have the new event. We're actually tracking users, but can we change and adapt the experience accordingly?
Yes.
So I want to see popular Facebook products.
Right. So we have a space for that on the front page. We are now showing customer favorites here in this slot. Let's change that to be most popular on Facebook. So then we just do exactly as we did with the category page earlier on. We edit the web part, and we go to advanced mode and to sorting. And if you remember, that particular event type was mapped to usage event 1 recent. Okay. Okay. And save page. And these are the most popular on Facebook, and just to be, so that is very obvious. I'll modify the caption. Popular on Facebook. Save. Now we should have our popular Facebook items on the front page.
Good. That will actually change daily.
It will change daily.
Right. Good. So, you heard that we are processing these events daily, and you might be thinking as a developer, I've added this new event type. Do I really have to wait for the next day before I can actually try and see if I got some events in there? The short story is you don't have to. There is a way to import historic events, and you can control that through PowerShell. You can actually control the whole change, start the analysis, processing engine, and then see the events flow into the system, so you can test and see. You can also think of this as a way to fight the bootstrap problem. If you don't have any events, then you can actually, and you have some real events from some third-party system, you can load them into the system this way. And that's actually, we've synthesized some of the Facebook-like events into our demo. So Dag, let's go back to the system and see that we already have some events there, and when doing so, we can actually look at how we can do ad hoc reporting, deriving analytics from our search index.
Yep, so I'll take us back to the product catalog that actually contains our items. This is where we can see the counts and the output from the calculations directly. There's this new feature called Most Popular Items. And when I click that, it brings up a page that is also driven from search, but will now sort, take the same list and show it sorted by the event types that are defined in the system. Right here it is sorted by most views, and you can see we have entered a set of view events into the system. You will also find the custom event types that we have created, most notably the Facebook-like events. There you go. This UI can also be used to browse through the item catalog and find trends in usage that are otherwise difficult to see. So, for example, I want to see what washers are popular in my set. I simply put that into the query box, and that's I know that it is the title. I want.
It's hard to type on stage.
If you know the name of the managed properties in the index, for example, where the price is, you can also use that to surface the items that are only. There you go. That are, for example, the cheap ones, the ones that cost less than $1,000. That will bring up another list. So in this way, you can sort of browse through your system and find patterns that are otherwise difficult to get at. The last thing to show is that you can press this popularity trends link, which will bring up a chart of that item's usage over the last period. That will bring up a chart like this in Excel. It shows, the first one here shows the usage over the last 14 days, and the other one shows the usage over the last 3 years, month by month. You can follow the trend of that particular item.
So that actually concludes the first deep dive. So that was on capture user behavior. Just to briefly summarize, we added the Facebook like button on our item details page, now tracking what's popular by Facebook users, and we use that to change the experience on our front page. So when people go to the front page, they will see what are the most liked products, and that will change every day according to actual usage on that site. We'll switch gears and we'll talk about the next topic, which is recommendations. And by recommendations, we think of the feature that you sometimes see as people who like this product also like these products. We'll talk about the out-of-the-box feature, and we'll also talk about how you can personalize that and build solutions on top of recommendations capability. So here's just a quick illustration of how recommendations, if we always simplify how it works in our product. So it's people who like this product also like. So here you see a set of events. Christer, I viewed a camera, Dag bought a camera, and Dag viewed a camera bag. Based on the analytics, which is then looking through all of these events, we can then conclude that when people are looking at a particular camera, they also tend to buy this camera bag. And with that, we say that the camera bag is a recommendation for the camera. It's important to understand that this is not item similarity. We're not saying that we're recommending this a camera bag because it's the same brand or belongs to this particular camera in any particular way. It's just derived from user behavior. And we find that that sometimes unlocks relationships between items that the store owners didn't anticipate. It's a really good measure, a way to drive upsell, and you'll get good coverage if you have good usage in your system. We also built this particular feature deep into search. And Dag will first show you how we can enable the out-of-the-box feature on our item details pages, and then he'll show us through examples what we mean when we say that recommendations is now a first-order citizen of search.
Yeah, to do that, let's go and take a look at the item details page again. What we want to do is to add recommendations to it of the type people who view this item, people who like this item also liked, at the bottom here. So that should be quick, because recommendations is built into SharePoint, and there is even a dedicated web part for it. So let's just add that web part to the page. We'll move it to the bottom. And we need to configure it. We'll have 4 of those items. We'll use the built-in display templates. And let's give it a nice Chrome. Go, but most importantly, let's configure the query. So what we want to get recommendations for is the ID of the item that is being rendered on the page that we are on. So it's not really the current page, it is actually an ID that we will be getting from the URL. So the ID of the item is the last token in the URL, and that's what we'll tell the web part to go get recommendations for. I don't want to restrict this by app because it's actually in another site collection. And there you go. The test pane shows that our query is now returning recommendations for the current item. Let's save. Okay. Save page. And we have recommendations. And to show you that this is actually recommendations and will vary, let's try to look at some other items. If I go to this tablet, you'll see different recommendations for that one.
It's okay to clap, by the way.
And so on. So let me show you why or how recommendations is really a first-rate citizen of search. I'll zoom in a little here so you can see what I'm doing.
Nice.
If I go to a normal search pane and search for example, Litware, which is one of the brands in our store, it will bring up random items, but or items of that mark. So if I go and get these item IDs that I mentioned and enter a more specific query.
It's a Norwegian keyboard thing. It's the Arctic keyboard that you brought.
Recommended 4 is a managed property in the search index that contains the recommendations that have been produced by the analysis engine. So if I do this search, I will get recommendations for that particular item. And furthermore, if I go in and get another item ID, I can now use the search query language and chain a set of these with OR. So the result set that is returned now is the superset of the recommendations for both these items. And if I could, I can't do that here in this UI, but if I could set the rank model to be a recommendations rank model, the item on top would be the one that was the best recommendation for both those items. So it will accumulate like recommendation score from both those items that we have queried for. So you can see that recommendations really is a built-in feature in search.
Good. So we added recommendation, but it's the same recommendation for everyone. We think it's a super cool feature, but you want to have personalized recommendations, or at least you want to challenge us if we can do that. And the last thing Doug just showed you, the fact that we can do an OR query and get recommendations for a set of products, that's what we're going to utilize when we're now going to add personalized recommendations. So essentially what we're going to do, we're going to look at when somebody's entering the site, we're going to look at what they're clicking and looking at, and that set, we will make that set sort of represent what the user is trying to achieve. So we'll take that set of items that is just browsed and seen, and we'll ask the system to give me the best recommendation for that whole set. And in fact, I think that's a pretty good way of, typically what you've just done is a good indicator of where you want to go. So that's a pretty good context to define what you are as a user right there and then. And we're going to do that by adding a new custom web part called the user history web part. What it will do, it will simply, it will sit silently hidden on each of the item detail pages, and it will track in a cookie the fact that I have looked at this item. So if I'm looking at a keyboard, a camera, and a TV, then the user history web part will have that history. That's step one. The next step is that on our front page today, there's the staff recommendations. We don't want curated staff recommendations. We want personalized recommendations. So if you go back to the front page, you should see recommendations that are personal to you. And if you do anything on the site, if you browse to certain products, come back to this page, that set should have changed. And the way we're going to do that is that we're going to replace the content by search web part, which is already there, powering the curated one, with a custom one, which Doug will show you how to do this. But basically what that content search web part will do, it will issue the query for all the products that I've just seen. So specifically, it will be the recommended for keyboard, OR with camera, TV, so on and so forth. Now, this is a theory. Dag, I'm interested if you can go from theater to real stuff.
Let's try.
Let's just bring up the
Okay. So the first thing we need to do is to log the history of what we're clicking, and we'll do that on the item details pages, of course. So we'll edit this page and add another web part, which is one of our custom web parts that we've made for this session. It's the user history web part. I'll just add that and make sure that it stays nice and hidden. Removing the Chrome. So now that's invisible, and it tracks all the item IDs, the item URLs that I'm visiting. Okay, good. The next thing we need to do is to actually put a web part here that is capable of getting the personalized recommendations. So for that, we have created another custom web part. And let's first take a look at that. So here's the code for that web part. It's not a lot. We've called it personalized recommendations. It derives from the content by search web part native to SharePoint. When this web part is loaded, this add my custom properties method will be called. And we'll take a look at one line of code here, this one. So the web part goes out to the data provider, which is the interface to the search engine, and adds a property to the query text property. So it modifies the query text that is sent to the search engine. Okay, and what have we put into the query text? That is done in this construct query method. And here you can see the most important thing of that code. It creates a set of recommended for terms, just as I did in the search UI previously, where all the terms are recommended for and one of the URLs that I have just visited. So it will end up with a set of recommended for terms representing my history. And then that is written to the query object, and that will be the query that is issued to the backend. So now that we have this web part, let's add it to the page. But first I'm going to modify the caption. Up front, what we want is recommended for you. Just a quick, make sure that the SPX page is generated. Okay, so that's the caption. Now let's add the web part. Here we go. And we need to configure it just as all the other web parts. I need to set the display templates. I need to set that to give me 4 results. And I don't want a caption. And I want to use the 5 last URLs in my user history, and I need to tell it that the name of the item, the property in the index is recommended for. Now let's go and modify, take a brief look at the query itself. We need to make sure that no other query is sent. We just want it to be the one that is being generated from our code, so I'll just remove that line. And the most important thing is we need to select how to rank this. As I told you, if we could earlier, if we could sort the results by the correct ranking model, we would get the best recommendations on top. And that's what I'm doing here. There is a built-in rank model for recommendations called recommender ranking model. Okay, that should do it. save. And we have recommendations for me. Okay, so these items should now be recommendations for the item that, the only item that I have visited since I added the logo web part. So just to make sure that this actually works, let's go and pretend that we're very, very interested in washers today.
Okay. that's typical.
I'm looking for washers.
Yeah. You need clean clothes.
That's what I want.
Yeah. And in Tromsø, we have plenty of clothes to keep us warm. So.
Okay, going back to this, we should now expect there to be a lot of washers here or something similar. There you go.
Whoa! Good, you're hard at work. So this wraps up the second deep dive on recommendations. Quick recap. We added people who liked, also liked. We added one web part. It works for all the products in our catalog. And through some custom code, we added personal recommendations that changes based on your behavior on that site. Last, we say the best for last. The last deep dive, target user segments. So now we're actually going to go back to Donna and Dag, and we're going to target content based on where they're from. And the way that we're going to do this is that Donna and Dag, they both have a Facebook profile. So we're actually going to add a Facebook login button on our page. So when somebody, or in this case Dag, is clicking on that web part will communicate with a custom Facebook app. It will see that this is Dag. And obviously, if this is the first time Dag is doing this, you will get the familiar Facebook, is it allowed to share my profile with this app? And Dag has already done that. This web part will then read Dag's location, send that back to the web part, which will then write it to a cookie. So now the system knows that Dag has just entered the site, and he's from Norway. Next thing that needs to happen is that something needs to happen on the site. And what we're going to utilize is the fact that when you go to the cameras page today, you see a listing of cameras and cameras accessories, but there's some empty space on top, and we want to leverage that empty space and drive targeted promotions for Dag. Now, Dag is from the Arctic. He's from Tromsø. And if you talk about cameras, there's one thing that's important in Tromsø, and that's to take pictures of the northern lights. People come from all over the world to see the northern lights. And if you haven't seen it, you should. I mean, I'm born and raised in Tromsø, seen it many, many times. Every time it's up there in the sky, I just have to take a short pause, and it just gets me every time. And I think that's true for everyone here in Tromsø, right? So the promotion we need to see when we go there is a dedicated, perfect Aurora camera promotion with a 30% off. I like 30% off. And how can we do that? So we're going to add, again, a custom content search web part on our page, similar to what we did with personalized recommendations. This time, we're going to set a property on the query that's called the user segment terms. Really, that's just a way to annotate the query and to tell the system that this query is issued by somebody from Norway. So now the system end-to-end knows that I'm from Norway, I'm coming into this particular category, but how can we then add the promotion? And that's where the business user enters. So we have this thing called query rules in the product. Hopefully you've heard about that. There are separate sessions on that. In my mind, query rules is somewhat similar to, in Outlook, you can create these rules on how to filter and move your emails in. This is similar. You can create rules, but instead of doing that on where to put your incoming email, you're actually telling the system how to behave when somebody is browsing to your site. So in this case, we're going to add a query rule that says if somebody happens to be from Norway, enter into my system, then show them this promotion here. So that's fine and dandy. Sounds easy enough. Let's give you the challenge and see if you can get it working on our site.
Thanks. So once you and your
just switch that first.
business owners have decided what segments you have and what segments and how you want to target them, you need to tell SharePoint about those segments. And we're going to use the term store for that. So let me go into the site settings here, the term store management. And I have created already a new term set called segments, which already contains a term for US citizens. We'll see if that will help us. I'll create a new one now for Norway, because that's a new segment we want to target. Norway segment. And we'll give that a custom property that we'll use when looking up this term later on from our custom web part. And, Norway. So Norway here, I know, is the string that will be returned from Facebook when we query it for my geographic location. Okay, so we have told SharePoint that there is a segment group called the Norway segment. Next thing we need to do is to create the query rule that will react to this. So we do this in the Manage Query Rules UI. I'll use local SharePoint results. That's where we have. You can see there's a Nevada fan promotion down here that we'll get back to. Now I want to create a new rule. This is the Norway camera promotion. Promotion rule. It's not going to react on anything in the query because there is no user query, so we'll simply remove this default condition. But we need to take a look at the context condition that will trigger this rule. And the important one you see down here. The query is performed by these user segments. And we will select one user segment here. We'll call it Norway user segment. And this is where we couple it with the segment term that we just defined in the term store. So now I have a rule that will trigger whenever a user is from Norway. What do we do when the rule fires? That's what we define down here. We want to place a banner ad on our page, and we'll do that with using this option, add a promoted result. And as you saw from the picture, perfect Aurora camera, 30% off. It needs a URL for the picture. I've already uploaded that to our site collection, so there's a picture there. I'll use that like this. And we also need the URL of the item that we're promoting. Let me put that in the description too. Save. Okay, so now I have a rule that fires for Norwegians and will promote this result and return that as a part of the search query. Good. So SharePoint still doesn't know if I'm from Norway or not. And we need a specialized web part to do that. So we have created yet another custom web part that will look up my location from Facebook and attach that to the query using the same techniques as for the personalized recommendations web part. So here's the code for that web part, targeted content search, derives from the content by search web part. On load, it will call the add my custom properties method, which has a line of code much similar to the one in the other web part. It will contact the data provider and attach to a property called user segment terms, the user segment terms that we have detected. I'll come back to how we're doing that. But SharePoint knows of this property. It will look for it in any query that comes in. And if there is a property called user segment terms, it will try to look up those segment terms and see if there are any query rules that should trigger on them. and then try to trigger them. So where do we get our user segment terms from? That is being done in the add Facebook segment terms method, which we have up here. Now this method contains a lot of code that just communicates with Facebook the way that should be done. I'll point out a couple of lines. This is the query that we issue to Facebook. We get our current location. From the current location, we get the country. And using the country, we look up in the term store to see if we have any terms with that country. So this is where we get a match on the Norway segment that I just entered. And then, if there's a match, we add it to the user segment terms, and that closes the loop. SharePoint will look up my location and add the corresponding term to the query. And now the rules can trigger. So back to our site. So the web part that's been added here is actually a targeted content search web part. So let me quickly just show you how we can use that to test our query rules. So if I go in and change the query, what we want to do is to look at the test tab here and the advanced test tab. And if you see down here, there's a special entry for user segment terms. Here I can, when testing this query, fake that I belong to Norway or some other country, or fake actually any user segment term. So let's just do that for this test. I'll tell SharePoint that I belong to the user segment terms, and then let's see what happens to our result set. You see here now, in addition to the relevant results that were returned earlier on, we now have special term results, and that happens to be the promotion that I want to put on my page. Okay, so we know that a query rule works. We'll return our banner. Now we need a place to put it. So this target content search web part is busy rendering the relevant results set. So it can't render the other one. We need to add a web part for doing that, and for that we'll just use a standard content search web part. Let's edit it. Since it's a banner ad, I'll select a large picture display template, and I'll set the none. Okay. So the trick here is that there's an option here called settings, and you can see that it asks query results provided by, and normally a content search web part will send a query to the search index, and it will render the results from that query. But that's not what we wanted to do here. What we wanted to do is actually render results that are gotten by the other web part on the page. So when I select this content search web part will not send a query to the search index. It will just be there and wait for results from its companion on the page. And furthermore, we see in the result table down here, it is not the relevant results we want to render, because the other web part is doing that. We want it to be the special term results web part. There we go. And that should do it. But still nothing. Of course, we have not logged into Facebook yet.
Did you save it?
Hmm?
Yeah, did you save the page?
No, I have not saved the page. Because I would need to add another web part to it before we're done. So we need to give the user a possibility to log into Facebook and actually give it consent that we can look up the location. So let's add that web part. and save the page. And still nothing. That's because I haven't logged in. Now I already am logged in, so when I push this button, I will be automatically logged into Facebook and the promotion should appear. Let's hope. Yes.
Well, Doug, you could still be cheating.
I could still be cheating,
Yeah.
but...
I want to see what happens if Donna logs in.
Okay, so let's open an in-private session here and open sites, commerce, go to...
So no promotion there,
Oh.
that sounds good.
No promotion, I'm not logged in. I'll log in with Facebook and it asks me for credentials. This is Donna's email.
She's a Facebook test user, so she has a pretty interesting email.
Okay, let's log in and see what she gets. Ah,
Ooh.
promotion for a fan for Hot Nevada, that's not better.
Good. So that ends the final deep dive. We added the Facebook login button. When we did, you saw the promotions change based on who logged into the site. And the good thing, if you think about it, now that we've done all this plumbing, basically if business users want to, say, add promotions for Swedes or Danes or whatnot, they can now do that just by adding new query rules. They don't have to do any coding or go back on this page and change anything. They just add new rules. And they can set for query rules to take effect at certain times and whatnot. So that from now on, they really control this overall experience. So to summarize the whole thing, we started with this Contoso search-driven site, and we said that we're going to make it adaptive. So we added these features that really changed according to what people are doing on the site. It's adapting to trending products, and we can do recommendations. It's personalized. It changes according to what I am doing. And the last thing it's doing is, in fact, that it changes according to what the business wants. So business owners can then target the segments as you just saw. Important thing to note, we also told you that we hope that by the end of the session you would understand that this is building blocks. It's definitely building blocks. You could take Facebook completely out of the picture and replace the profile in Facebook with whatever you happen to know about your users. Or in fact, you could take profiles out of the picture completely. You could segment users on the fly. Simple segment would be if somebody's entering the site through a certain device, Microsoft Surface, maybe that says something about that user. If it's a phone, that's one way to segment users. Another way is to actually look at the click pattern of users. And a customer of ours, Jones Lang LaSalle, they had a presentation yesterday when they talked about what they've done on their site. They look at the click pattern of users as they enter the site, and they try to segment them on the fly. And the query rules that then take effect are they are pushing relevant news to their different user segments. These are all building blocks. We hope and we think that you will be able to creatively create experiences that will delight your end users and that will delight us. We really want to see what you can make out of these features. Okay, so there's still some time for questions. Before we go there, I just want to point out a couple of related sessions where you can go and learn more about the Contoso product site experience. A couple here that relate to how you can make it, design it, and make it look nice, modern. There's one on dynamics and how you can add shopping carts and sort of complete the overall shopping browse experience. And I'll highlight the one on the top, grow your business online with SharePoint's additive experiences tomorrow. It's similar to what we had today, but from a more business perspective, and we'll show you more rules and how you can take effect. And that's it. Questions?